So how do you best maximize your time with all of these distractions or frustrations? What are some of the things you do?
I think you discussed using some technology last week.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe use some emails or something like that.
Okay. Using technology.
I've gotten to the point where I craft my lesson to fit in a 25-minute time frame.
Okay, smaller lesson. Better to teach less that they'll remember than more they'll forget. Right? Anything else?
I think with what he's saying, having your lesson organized.
Okay, preparation.
Yeah.
That helps, doesn't it? Good. You guys teach this for me. Well, maybe there's a couple other things we can learn. And so what I want to do is I want to go over some time eaters if not managed. Now, I want to note this, that none of these are bad. There aren't typically bad things that happen in our life groups. But if the things that are happening aren't managed, they can become bad. They can become these sources of frustration. It's not bad that there's a bunch of people in the choir going to a life group. But if not understood or managed well, it can be a distraction. We have some life groups that are all choir because they realized they didn't want to be rude and walk out on people. And so they just formed a group of their own because they know that they leave early and stuff. Start time. If start time is not managed well, it can become a nuisance. And let's say it like this. If 5 of us are here at 6 o'clock and I said, let's wait for some other people to come. What have I just officially done? Of what?
We don't need to be on time.
We don't need to be here on time, and the people who did come on time, you don't matter. That's right. I don't value your time at that point, right? And if we wait 10 minutes before we get started, because then we've got a little critical mass, and then we start with the announcements, or then we start with the prayer time, why would people come, right? And so we've got to make sure that if the start time is managed. Now, for some of us in the dynamics of what we live in, there's nobody in the room at 9:15 because they're dropping off kids or they may have a tough time finding parking. And I get that, but you're just going to have to manage this or you're going to condition your people that I don't have to come. And there are several things that condition them. Prayer time conditions them. I know we're going to pray for the first 10 minutes. I can still wait in line and get my coffee. Those are things that if not managed well. And so what do you think are some options of how you could best manage prayer time?
Have it at the end.
Have it at the end? What else? I've seen several groups. Our group does this. We put sheets of paper on every table. And we have them write down a prayer request and give it to somebody in the class, and they'll email it during the week. And sometimes if we finish early, we will have them pray at their tables or pray in groups. But our standard is share your prayer request written down and turn it in. So, because we could spend 10 minutes. Part of also the way you can help carve out or make prayer time more efficient is to say, hey, we want to have a time of prayer and give a specific thing we want to pray for. So it's not Uncle Betty's brother's dog that comes up on the list. But hey, today what we're going to pray for are people at our office that may not know Jesus that we need to pray for. And say, I don't need names, I just need some initials. And all of a sudden now the prayer time is very focused. It may be that where we're going in the lesson is about evangelism. But now you see how I'm total hour teaching. I'm even using my prayer time to help my learner readiness to get my people to go where I want them to go. Does that make sense? Now they're thinking about people in the office, and the 4 points I make or 3 points I make in the lesson, they're going to start to think about how I can take those points and relate it to the people I just shared with. So there are ways that you can maximize prayer time or regain it or narrow it down so you don't give every random person that's going on. And sometimes you can do it at the end. For instance, if you've got people that are leaving, don't do your prayer time at the beginning. Do it at the end because you know there'll be 4 people and we can send this information out later if we need to do that. But we can maximize the teaching there. Now this one was brought up, announcements. There are multiple ways to do announcements. We try to make sure they stay pretty small and give you the option of what you do announce. We try not to put anything that's not announcement worthy. in the life group news. And we use you. You are a conduit to the core of our church. 70% of the people who show up here on Sunday morning are in a life group. That's about what our average is. And so for you to say things to them so we don't have to say them from the pulpit, if you notice, we try to say as few announcements from the platform as we possibly can, because we're trying to maximize the time that's in there as well. And so life group becomes the next best for us to do that, or the bulletin becomes that. And so that is something that's always available. And the way you could do announcement or let me ask you, what are multiple ways you could do announcements so they don't become a distraction? Can email them something that's...
The paper program.
You could what?
In the program,
Uh-huh.
you receive...
Oh, give them the bulletin in there. You can write them on the board when they're walking the room so you don't have to go over them. Great way. You can text them to people. Depending on how your class communication is set up, you can send those out and use it in multiple different ways. So there are a lot of options. Now there are some days it's okay. I'm going to go over for 40 seconds. Like for instance, my Saturday night group, I've got a guy who he gives the announcements every night. And he'll take about 45 seconds to give the announcements. And then he always closes the announcements with a joke. And it is one of the things that everybody looks forward to is Tom's joke. And so for us to cut that out would be a mistake. But that's why we start on time. Even if the people aren't there yet, we start on time so people will come to make sure they're there so they can hear Tom's joke. And I really think we should have written all of them down and he could have sold a book. I mean, it's just that funny. He always has a joke and everybody's looking forward to it. But he does the announcements every week. And so he'll look over the sheet and go, boom, 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 these 4 things I'm going to announce. And then he does his joke and then he says, all right, Jack, you take off.
And I think that's a strategy because people come to the class and they try to be early because they want to hear that.
Right.
So that's a strategy.
That's right. You're trying to do something that'll get them there early. Right. If we condition our people, they won't come. If they know we're going to fellowship for the first 15 minutes, that means I don't have to be there till 15 after. Because I know that they're going to be fellowshipping and I'm just busy right now or I want coffee, and so it conditions them to not be there. I was in one life group here that had a question of the day every week that they were together. And they would let every person answer the question. And it could take 15 to 20 minutes because of 30 or 40 people in the room answering the question. And I just thought it was a huge waste of time when what you could do is have a couple of the week or 2 members of the week, and you have a guy and a girl or 2 girls and say, we have 3 questions we're going to ask this week, and because we want you to get to know John and we want you to get to know Mike. And so we've got them up here, and so how'd you find First Orlando? And they answer their questions, and you answer your question. And then we're done, and you've gotten a chance to know some people, and you go, I didn't know that Mike was a computer guy. I like computers. I'm going to talk to Mike after the class and find out more about what he does with computers. Or I had one blow up last night. I need to ask him what, that's what he gets hammered with. But you see how you can use that to where you don't get something that's consuming 10 to 15 minutes of your class time, that you can narrow down and creatively rethink it so that you can maximize what you're trying to do. Another thing that eats time is fellowship. Is fellowship important? It's very important, isn't it? So how do we balance fellowship in the hour to make sure we're maximizing our teaching time? Get there early. That's right. We're gonna have food here at 9. Class starts at 9:15, right? Because at 9:15 the food's going away. What else? How else can we do it?
Because that's part of educating the people also.
Right.
You know.
So we just have 1 dozen donuts because we know the first 12 here are going to get donuts. The second 12 are going to get nothing. So they get there, right? What else? How else can we do?
You could sit together. You could go out to eat lunch afterwards.
Okay, absolutely. You don't have to fellowship in the room to have fellowship. Some groups go out for lunch. Our Saturday night group, once a month, the first Saturday of every month, they go out and eat after church. Because we do life group, then church, and then they go out and they eat together to fellowship.
I think we have to realize here that fellowship is part of the class.
Absolutely.
And you build around it. You don't try to minimize it so we can get to the teacher. That's part of the deal, with people getting to know each other, people getting in each other's lives.
Right. And I think you can leverage that as a part of your teaching. I asked all of you to answer 2 questions for us to get started. You may have thought it had everything to do with that, but what was I creating? Fellowship. Because we were talking and you were sharing something, and depending on what the question could be, I could discover something, or you may open up and share something very personal in this group, and all of a sudden this group's going to come around you because they sense that you're hurting. That's genuine fellowship, and it's a way to leverage it so that we just have random talk about the football game, but if I can direct that fellowship and it helps me with my lesson, I'm going to get more teaching than just 24 hours a year. So, now sometimes I'm with Bob. We're going to teach for 4 and we're going to play for 1. So we're just going to everybody bring potluck and we're going to have fellowship and it's what we did a few weeks ago for Missions Fest. So we had everybody brought a dessert. I got some pizzas. We just kind of sat around, got to know each other, talked about missions a little bit, what we were going to do at Missions Fest, and it was a great time of fun and fellowship. But that was our purpose. And if you spread that out, or if you do that strategically, it can really be a very, very effective time. But you don't want a life group where you're just teaching all the time. You've got to build community. You've got to have fellowship and what's going on. So if all of these are managed, it's a good hour. You also need to remember, you don't have to do all of these every time. If you have a prayer time, it doesn't have to be a prayer time every week. I'm trying to remember if I put this on. What are some other things, if not managed, could eat time?
The individual participation. Individual participation.
Oh, people consuming,
Too much.
right? They talk too much, become consuming in the class. That can happen. Definitely consume. Let's see if there was definitely people leaving early because the big group's got to go. And I would save some things for this time after they're gone. I would do prayer time more often here after they leave than while they're there, and send them the request. Because that way I can jump on my lesson sooner and what's going on, and or I would make my announcements shorter, condensed, maybe send those out even with there to make sure I get those people so I can maximize the teaching with what's going on. And we talked about how to recognize rabbits. Esther was sharing about how last week in her lesson, the class chose to go follow a rabbit, and she just kind of backed to see where it was going to go. Remember, that's what you got. Some of them you follow, some of them you don't. She followed it, and it came right back to where she was going to lead them. And she said it was just wonderful watching it happen. And she would just throw a question in there to steer it a little bit, and they'd go a little bit, and she'd throw another question and steer it, and it came right back to where she wanted to take them, and they did it all on their own at that point. It was a great way to maximize that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, another person at the end of the class, when we have prayer time, she's already written down everything off the board on her notes. Then every request that's verbally given, she writes that down, and by the time we get home after church, we've already received it on the email.
That's great.
Every single prayer.
That's great. And you can definitely do that. Just the same way with announcements. Or you can put announcements up there, you can put prayer requests, and if you condition everybody, that's the way we do it, then it's still a way. Again, don't feel the trap that I got to do every one of these every week. What you need to do every week is teach God's Word. Transform lives. Prayer time, very important. I'm not negating any of these. But you can manage these so that they don't hurt you when it comes to your teaching time and get those distracted there. So let's talk about time meters, and they're managed. How do we do that? We do that with total hour teaching. We've talked about this. From the moment people arrive to the moment they leave, you're still teaching. Even like I said, if there's a learner readiness on the tables or in the room, that starts the teaching. And when we close with our prayer time, who can we pray for this week that doesn't know Christ? It's a very specific, still is a part of the teaching. It's also the thing you can follow up with the next week to say, how did it go this week with the people you prayed for? And if you've prepared, then you can anticipate the things that can eat time, and you can manage them more together. I would encourage you as a team to plan together. Some of you in this room have multiple teachers. Some of you have directors and other teachers in the room. you have a team of people, and often what will happen is the teacher does his thing and the director does his thing, and neither of the two shall meet. But if you plan together, then you can begin to speak into the whole process of what's happening in the hour versus your part and my part. Because what happens is you start working on these models of life groups where the director may get this time and this is teaching, you may get a lot of teaching and directing, or you may end up with directing and teaching because this director actually knows what you're going to teach on, and he gives 3 or 4 of his points, and he's just, shot your thunder at that point, right? And all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, thank you. So depending on the model, well, if you're working together as a team, you both know what's going to happen in this hour. And so you can leverage that. Well, then I'll get up at the end, very much like what we do in worship planning. We'll look at the whole hour of worship planning, and we want to create a moment from when people get on campus to when they leave the room. And so it's, well, what if we did this? What if we moved this to here? What if we use that song right here? All that is so all the people on the platform and in the room and all the tech team and everybody who knows what's going on, so we can maximize the hour and have the most efficiency so that we have the most life change. Does that make sense? It's me, Jess. Good. Stay with me here. You're doing great. All right. Next thing.